Look at him! He doesn't belong in first class!
Ladies and gentlemen, we're returning to the gate. There's been an incident that requires my immediate attention.
Nhìn
The
cậu
words
xem,
crackled
chẳng ra
through
làm
the
sao
cabin
cả.
speakers like
Thật là
lightning
thất vọng.
cutting through storm clouds. Flight 447 to London Heathrow shuddered to a violent stop on the JFK tarmac engines, screaming in protest as Captain Miguel Rodriguez slammed the brakes with the force of a man who'd seen enough injustice.
Thank you all for being here
one
tonight.
lifetime.
Together with the Flight Foundation, we
Passengers
embark on
lurched
this journey
forward.
one step at a
Champagne
time.
glasses clinked.
Look at
Designer
him!
purses
He doesn't
tumbled from
belong in
overhead
first
compartments.
class!
But in the first-class cabin, all eyes turned toward row 2, where a 17-year-old black teenager sat motionless in seat 2A, his hands folded calmly in his lap, while a well-dressed white woman pointed at him like he was a loaded weapon. She had just accused him of terrorism, on a live stream watched by thousands, with no evidence except the color of his skin and the assumption that he didn't belong in first class. What she didn't know was that the quiet boy she was trying to destroy was about to become the youngest tech entrepreneur in Google's history. What she couldn't have imagined was that her 60 seconds of hatred would trigger a revolution in air travel that would echo across every airline in America. And what she never suspected was that the captain now walking down the aisle toward them had lost his own brother to the exact same kind of racial profiling she was attempting. Before we dive into this story that broke the internet and changed airline policy forever, where are you watching from? Drop your city below. And if you believe respect should be standard at any altitude, smash that subscribe button. Because what you're about to witness isn't just about one flight. It's about the moment an entire industry decided that dignity matters more than dollars. This story exploded across every social media platform in real time. The hashtag Flight447 trended worldwide. The video footage was viewed over 50 million times in the first week. News outlets from CNN to BBC covered it as breaking news. But behind the viral moment was something deeper. A quiet act of courage from a teenager who refused to be intimidated. A captain who chose justice over convenience. And a woman whose assumptions cost her everything she thought made her superior. The rain hammered against the reinforced windows of Terminal 4 like angry fists demanding attention. Inside the exclusive Admiral's Club lounge, crystal champagne flutes clinked softly against mahogany tables, while CNN played silently on mounted screens. Outside, lightning split the gray November sky, but inside, the storm brewing was far more dangerous. Flight 447 was already delayed 2 hours due to weather. Passengers checked their watches, tapped their phones, and muttered complaints about missed connections. The London Tech Summit would begin in 14 hours, and some of the most powerful names in Silicon Valley were aboard this flight. None of them realized they were about to witness something that would overshadow every presentation at the conference. The teenager in the corner booth didn't look like he belonged among the tech moguls and hedge fund titans. His black hoodie was faded from too many wash cycles. His jeans had a small tear near the left knee. His white Converse sneakers were scuffed and worn, but his fingers moved across the laptop keyboard with the precision of a concert pianist, lines of code flowing down the screen like digital poetry. His name was Devin Martinez, 17 years old. Mixed heritage, black and Hispanic, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a hospital in Queens to pay for his coding classes. Devin had never flown first class before. He'd never flown anywhere before, actually. But 3 days ago, an email had arrived that changed everything. Google wanted to acquire his artificial intelligence app for $2.3 million. They were flying him to London to announce the deal at the summit. He would be the youngest entrepreneur in the company's history. Across the lounge, Victoria Ashford sat rigid in a cream leather chair, her manicured fingers wrapped around a glass of Dom Perignon like it was a weapon. At 52, she carried herself with the practiced arrogance of someone who'd never been told no without immediately demanding to speak to a manager. Her Chanel suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her Hermes bag certainly did. She was the wife of pharmaceutical CEO Richard Ashford, and she'd spent the last 25 years perfecting the art of looking down on people. Victoria had been watching Devon for 30 minutes. She'd seen him typing on his computer. She'd noticed the way staff members treated him with the same courtesy they showed everyone else. It bothered her. In her world, respect was earned through net worth and family connections. This boy had neither, which meant he was either lying about his ticket or someone had made a terrible mistake. She pulled out her phone and opened the camera app. If this boy was trying to scam his way into first class, she would document it. She would expose him. She would make sure he faced consequences for his audacity. Because Victoria Ashford had never met a problem she couldn't solve by speaking to someone in charge. Thunder rolled across the airport like a warning. But inside the lounge, the only sound was the soft clicking of laptop keys and the quiet rage of a woman who'd spent her entire life believing that appearance determined worth. In 47 minutes, Flight 447 would begin boarding. In 53 minutes, Victoria would learn that assumptions could be more dangerous than any storm. And in exactly 1 hour and 8 minutes, a 17-year-old boy would teach the entire world that dignity isn't something you buy with a first-class ticket. It's something you earn by how you treat other human beings. The storm outside was just beginning, but the storm inside the cabin of Flight 447 would change everything. Devon Martinez closed his laptop and checked his phone for the 15th time in 10 minutes. 3 missed calls from Mom. 2 text messages from his best friend Marcus asking if he was really flying to London, and 1 email marked urgent from his guidance counselor Ms. Rodriguez, who still couldn't believe one of her students was about to become a millionaire before graduation. The last text from his mother made his chest tighten. "Baby, remember what we talked about. Keep your head up, speak clearly, and don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. You earned this. I love you." Devon had earned it. 3 years of coding until his eyes burned. 3 years of turning down parties and basketball games to debug algorithms. 3 years of believing that if he just worked hard enough, smart enough, perfectly enough, the world would judge him by his talent instead of his skin color. His app CodeBridge was designed to help kids from underserved communities learn programming through interactive storytelling. It had started as a class project, then a local coding competition, then a regional showcase. Now Google's AI division wanted to integrate it into their educational platform and make Devon the youngest technical advisor in the company's history. The envelope in his backpack contained the official acquisition offer. $2.3 million plus stock options, plus a full-ride scholarship to Stanford if he wanted it. Devon had read the letter so many times he'd memorized every word, but he still couldn't quite believe it was real. He glanced around the lounge. Business executives in $1,000 suits typed on phones. Tech entrepreneurs debated market strategies over martinis. Investment bankers laughed about deals that moved millions with a signature. Devon wondered if any of them had ever coded for 16 hours straight in a bedroom they shared with their little sister. If any of them had ever used a library computer because their laptop crashed and they couldn't afford repairs. If any of them understood what it meant to carry your family's dreams on your shoulders at 17 years old. Across the lounge, Victoria Ashford was conducting her own form of research. She'd Googled first-class scam and airline fraud and was reading articles about people who used fake boarding passes to upgrade illegally. She'd screenshotted photos of Devon and was already composing an email to airline security describing a suspicious individual who was clearly out of place in the premium lounge. Victoria's own first-class ticket had been purchased without a second thought. She flew to London 3 times a year for charity galas and shopping expeditions. Richard's pharmaceutical company had private jets, but Victoria preferred commercial first class for the service and attention. She enjoyed being recognized by flight attendants. She liked the way other passengers looked at her with envy or respect. Flying first class wasn't just about comfort for Victoria, it was about status. It was about knowing that she belonged in spaces where others didn't. Which was why Devon's presence bothered her so deeply. He disrupted her understanding of how the world worked. In Victoria's universe, first-class passengers looked a certain way. they dressed a certain way. They carried themselves with the confidence that comes from generational wealth and exclusive education. This boy violated every assumption she'd ever made about who deserved luxury and who didn't. She watched him check his phone again and noticed the way his shoulders hunched slightly like he was trying to make himself smaller. Good, she thought. He should feel uncomfortable. He should know he didn't belong. Meanwhile, Captain Miguel Rodriguez was completing his pre-flight inspection in the cockpit of the Boeing 777. At 45, Rodriguez had been flying for major airlines for 20 years. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a military pilot before transitioning to commercial aviation. He'd flown presidents and prisoners, celebrities and refugees, billionaires and families spending their life savings on a once-in-a-lifetime vacation. Rodriguez had seen every kind of passenger behavior imaginable. He'd handled medical emergencies, weather delays, mechanical issues, and unruly passengers. But the incidents that stayed with him were always the ones involving discrimination. The times when passengers complained about sitting next to someone because of their race or religion. The moments when flight attendants had to intervene because someone decided another passenger didn't look right for their class of service. Those incidents reminded Rodriguez of his brother Carlos, who'd been killed in a police encounter 12 years ago after being wrongfully identified as a suspect. Carlos had been walking home from his job at an electronics store when someone called 911 to report a suspicious Hispanic male in the neighborhood. The responding officers had approached with weapons drawn and assumptions already made. Carlos had died on the sidewalk 3 blocks from his apartment, his work uniform still bearing his name tag. Since then, Rodriguez had made it his personal mission to ensure that his aircraft was a space where every passenger was treated with dignity and respect, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. He'd helped develop what the airline called the Dignity Protocol, a set of guidelines for handling incidents of passenger discrimination. It wasn't official company policy yet, but Rodriguez had been quietly implementing it on his flights for 6 months. Today, he had a feeling he might need it. The weather radar showed the storm moving east, which meant Flight 447 would likely depart on time despite the earlier delays. Rodriguez reviewed the passenger manifest. Full first-class cabin. Several tech executives traveling to the London summit. 1 passenger listed as VVIP due to age and special circumstances. Devin Martinez, 17 years old, flying alone to represent Google at an international conference. Rodriguez had read the brief memo about Devin's story. The kid had built something revolutionary and was being flown to London to announce a major acquisition. The airline had flagged his reservation to ensure everything went smoothly for such a young passenger on such an important trip. Rodriguez made a mental note to introduce himself to Devin personally before takeoff. In his experience, teenagers traveling alone sometimes needed extra reassurance, especially when they were flying first class for the first time. What he didn't know was that in 2 hours and 37 minutes he would be making the most important decision of his aviation career. As the rain continued to hammer the terminal windows, 3 lives were about to intersect in ways none of them could have predicted. A teenager carrying the dreams of his family and the hopes of his community. A woman whose sense of superiority was about to cost her everything she thought made her special. And a pilot whose commitment to justice would transform an ordinary flight into a moment that changed everything. The boarding announcement was still 20 minutes away, but the countdown to confrontation had already begun. The first sign of trouble came at 6:47 p.m. 43 minutes before boarding was scheduled to begin. Devin had moved to a table near the floor-to-ceiling windows to get better Wi-Fi signal for a video call with his mother. The connection was shaky, but he could see her face pixelated and smiling on his laptop screen. She was in their kitchen in Queens, still wearing her hospital scrubs from her shift. "Baby, you look so handsome," Maria Martinez said, her voice crackling through the speakers. "I wish I could be there to see you get on that plane. You'll see me on the news tomorrow, Mom." Devin laughed, adjusting his laptop screen. "Google's sending a whole camera crew to film the announcement." "My son on television." Maria wiped her eyes. Your abuela would be so proud. She always said you were going to do something special. Devin smiled, but he felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders again. His grandmother had died when he was 14, but not before spending countless hours teaching him that education was the only thing no one could ever take away from him. She'd scraped together quarters to pay for his first coding class at the community center. She'd believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. I'm nervous, Mom, Devin admitted, lowering his voice. What if I mess this up? What if I say something wrong? You listen to me. Maria's voice became firm. You belong in that room. You built something amazing. Those people at Google, they need you more than you need them. Don't ever forget that. Across the lounge, Victoria Ashford was eavesdropping on every word. She'd moved to a chair within earshot and was pretending to read Vogue while actually recording the conversation on her phone. In her mind, she was gathering evidence. The boy was clearly lying about his circumstances. No legitimate first-class passenger would be having this kind of conversation in public. No real tech entrepreneur would admit to being nervous about a business meeting. Victoria had been married to a pharmaceutical executive for 25 years. She'd attended countless board meetings, charity galas, and industry conferences. She knew how successful young entrepreneurs behaved. They were confident, polished, articulate. They wore expensive clothes and carried designer accessories. They didn't video chat with their mothers while wearing hoodies in airport lounges. When Devin ended the call and began gathering his things, Victoria made her move. She walked casually toward the window area, pretending to check the weather outside. As she passed his table, she deliberately knocked her Hermes bag into his laptop, causing it to slide toward the edge of the table. Oh my goodness, Victoria gasped, loud enough for other passengers to look over. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Devin caught his laptop before it could fall and looked up at her with confused but polite eyes. It's fine, ma'am. No damage done. You know, Victoria said, her voice carrying a practiced tone of concern, you might want to be more careful with equipment that isn't yours. Hotels and conference centers can be very strict about damages to loaner computers. The assumption hit Devin like a slap. She thought he was using borrowed equipment. She thought he couldn't afford his own laptop. She was already creating a narrative where he didn't belong in this space. Actually, this is my computer, Devin replied calmly. I built it myself. Victoria's eyes narrowed. The laptop was clearly custom with stickers from coding conferences and programming languages. It was either an elaborate fake or this boy was telling the truth. Neither option fit her predetermined conclusion about who he was. How interesting, she said, her smile becoming sharper. Are you traveling to London for a school trip? The question was loaded with assumptions. School trips meant supervised teenagers. Supervised teenagers didn't fly first class alone. Victoria was fishing for information that would confirm her suspicions about Devin's legitimacy as a premium passenger. I'm going to a tech conference, Devin answered, still polite but beginning to sense the underlying hostility in her questions. A tech conference, Victoria repeated as if she were testing the words for authenticity. How fascinating. What company do you work for? Devin hesitated. The Google acquisition wasn't public yet. He'd signed multiple non-disclosure agreements. He couldn't reveal specific details about the deal or his relationship with the company, but his hesitation read as deception to Victoria, who was already convinced he was lying. I'm not sure I should discuss business details with strangers, Devin said diplomatically. Victoria's face hardened. In her world, evasiveness meant guilt. Legitimate business travelers were proud to discuss their work. Important people name-dropped companies and positions. This boy's reluctance to provide details confirmed every suspicion she'd been nurturing for the past hour. Of course, Victoria said, her voice dripping with false understanding. I completely understand. Confidential information and all that. She walked back to her seat, but her mind was racing. The boy was clearly running some kind of scam. He'd probably stolen the laptop. He'd probably forged his boarding pass. He'd probably targeted this specific flight because he knew it was full of tech executives who might not question a young black face in first class if they assumed he was someone's intern or assistant. Victoria opened her phone and began composing a message to airport security. But as she typed, she realized she had no concrete evidence, no proof of wrongdoing, no documentation of illegal behavior. Just a feeling, just an assumption. Just the absolute certainty that someone like Devon didn't belong in the same space as someone like her. Meanwhile, Devon was experiencing his own growing unease. The woman's questions had been invasive and pointed. Her assumptions had been insulting and obvious. He'd dealt with similar interactions his entire life, but they never got easier. They never hurt less. He thought about his mother's warning. Keep your head up, speak clearly, and don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. But the truth was, he was starting to feel exactly like he didn't belong. Not because he wasn't qualified or legitimate, but because someone had decided his presence was inherently suspicious. Devon had experienced this feeling in department stores where security guards followed him through aisles. He'd felt it at restaurants where hostesses questioned his reservations. He'd lived with it at school where teachers expressed surprise at his academic performance. The assumption that he was in the wrong place with the wrong resources for the wrong reasons. But this was different. This was supposed to be his moment, his victory, his proof that hard work and talent could overcome any barrier. The fact that someone was questioning his right to be here in this space on this day felt like theft of the highest order. Tech blogger Maria Santos had been watching the entire interaction from her seat near the window. As a Latina journalist who covered Silicon Valley, she'd learned to recognize the subtle dynamics of discrimination in professional spaces. She'd seen the way Victoria approached Devon. She'd heard the loaded questions. She'd witnessed the assumption-making process that could derail careers and damage reputations. Maria opened Instagram and began recording a subtle story showing the lounge with a caption, "Interesting Dynamics at JFK Today." Sometimes the real story isn't the conference, it's how we treat each other on the way there. She didn't tag anyone or mention names, but her followers included thousands of tech industry professionals who would be traveling to London for the same summit. The post would plant a seed of awareness that would bloom into something much larger once the flight took off. The boarding announcement came at exactly 7:30 p.m., cutting through the lounge tension like a bell signaling the start of a boxing match. Flight 447 to London Heathrow is now boarding first and business class passengers at Gate 14. Please have your boarding passes and identification ready. Devon gathered his backpack, laptop, and phone charger. His hands were steady, but his heart was beating faster than normal. He'd been looking forward to this moment for weeks. The moment when he would board his first ever first-class flight and begin the journey that would change his life forever. Victoria gathered her purse scarf and rolling luggage. Her jaw was set with determination. She would board this flight, but she would also ensure that airport security and airline staff were aware of the suspicious individual traveling in first class. She would document everything. She would protect other passengers from what she was certain was an elaborate fraud. Neither of them knew that their interaction in the lounge had been the opening act of a drama that would soon capture the attention of the entire world. As they walked toward Gate 14, Devon pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his mother, boarding now. "I love you." Victoria opened her camera app and made sure it was ready to record. She had a feeling she would need evidence of what was about to happen. The gate area was crowded with passengers, but the first-class line was short and orderly. Devon and Victoria found themselves standing in queue, just 3 people apart, with only a family of 4 between them. The countdown to confrontation was now measured in minutes, not hours. And somewhere in the cockpit of Flight 447, Captain Miguel Rodriguez was completing his final safety checks, unaware that he was about to make a decision that would define the rest of his career. Gate 14 buzzed with the controlled chaos of international departure. 247 passengers waited in neat lines, first class and business class boarding. First followed by elite status members, then families with children, and finally the general boarding groups. Digital screens displayed flight information in 3 languages. Gate agents checked documents with practiced efficiency. Everything appeared normal. But Devin Martinez could feel the weight of Victoria Ashford's stare on his back like a physical presence. He stood third in the first-class line behind an elderly businessman reading the Financial Times and a young woman talking rapidly in what sounded like German. Devin had his boarding pass folded in his left hand and his driver's license in his right, just as his mother had instructed. He'd watched YouTube videos about first-class boarding procedures. He'd researched airline etiquette. He'd prepared for everything except being treated like a criminal before he even got on the plane. Victoria stood 6 feet behind him, her phone held at waist level with the camera app open and recording. She'd angled it to capture Devin without being obvious about it. In her mind, she was documenting evidence of fraud. In reality, she was creating the first footage of what would become the most viral airline incident in modern history. The line moved forward. The businessman showed his passport and was waved through with a smile. The German woman laughed at something the gate agent said and disappeared down the jet bridge. Devin stepped up to the podium. David Kim, the gate agent, was a soft-spoken man in his early 30s who'd worked for the airline for 8 years. He'd processed thousands of passengers, from celebrities to refugees to excited families beginning once-in-a-lifetime vacations. He treated everyone with the same professional courtesy, regardless of their age, appearance, or destination. "Good evening," David said, warmly accepting Devin's documents. "Flying to London today?" "Yes, sir," Devin replied, his voice steady despite his growing nervousness. David scanned the boarding pass and checked the ID. His computer screen displayed Devin's passenger information, including the VVIP designation that marked him as a special guest of the airline. David had read the brief memo about Devin's story earlier in his shift. Google's youngest entrepreneur flying to announce a major acquisition. The airline wanted to ensure he had an exceptional experience. Mr. Martinez. David said with genuine enthusiasm, "It's a pleasure to have you flying with us today. Seat 2A is one of our best first-class suites. I hope you enjoy the flight." Behind Devin, Victoria's face twisted with confusion and anger. The gate agent was treating this boy like a valued customer, like someone important, like someone who belonged in first class. It made no sense to her. "Thank you," Devin said, accepting his documents back. "I'm pretty excited." "First time in first class?" David asked conversationally. "First time flying anywhere," Devin admitted with a sheepish grin. David's smile widened. "Well, you picked a great flight to start with. The crew will take excellent care of you." Devin walked through the gate and disappeared down the jet bridge. Victoria stepped forward immediately, her phone still recording, though she'd positioned it to look like she was just holding it casually. "Excuse me," Victoria said to David, her voice carrying the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to getting immediate attention. "I need to speak with you about that passenger." David looked up politely. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Mrs. Vance Ashford," Victoria corrected sharply. "Victoria Ashford. And yes, there's definitely something you can help me with. That boy who just boarded. I don't think he should be in first class." David's professional smile remained fixed, but his eyes became more alert. He'd handled passenger complaints before, but something about Victoria's tone set off warning bells in his mind. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ashford, but I'm not sure what you mean. Mr. Martinez has a valid first-class ticket and proper identification." "I don't care what kind of ticket he has," Victoria said, her voice rising slightly. "I've been watching him in the lounge for over an hour. He doesn't belong there. He was on a video call talking about being nervous about a business meeting. Real executives don't act like that." David felt a chill run down his spine. He'd encountered this type of complaint exactly 3 times in his 8 years with the airline. Each time it had involved a passenger questioning another passenger's right to be in premium class based solely on their appearance or behavior. Each time the complaining passenger had been white and the questioned passenger had been a person of color. Mrs. Ashford David said carefully, "I can assure you that Mr. Martinez's ticket is legitimate. He's actually a special guest of the airline today." Victoria's eyes widened. "A special guest? What does that mean?" David realized he'd said more than he should have. Devon's VVIP status was supposed to be discreet, but Victoria's accusations were forcing him to provide more information than he would normally share with other passengers. "It means he's an important customer and we want to ensure he has an excellent experience with us." Victoria stared at David like he'd spoken in a foreign language. Important customer. Special guest. The words didn't compute with her assumption about who Devon was and why he was there. Important how she demanded. "He's a teenager. He's wearing a hoodie. He was nervous about a business meeting. Important customers don't act like that." David was now in an impossible position. He couldn't reveal details about Devon's private business without violating passenger confidentiality policies. But Victoria's complaints were escalating and other passengers in line were beginning to listen to the conversation. "Ma'am, I really can't discuss one passenger's details with another passenger. I'm sure you understand the privacy concerns." Victoria's face flushed red. Privacy concerns were something other people had to worry about. Not her. Not when she was trying to protect the integrity of first-class service. "Fine," she said, pulling out her phone more obviously. "I'll document this myself. When that boy causes problems on the flight, remember that I warned you." She turned and walked down the jet bridge, her heels clicking aggressively on the metal flooring. David watched her go with growing concern. He'd seen this dynamic play out before. A passenger who'd made assumptions about another passenger and was now committed to proving those assumptions correct regardless of evidence to the contrary. David made a quick decision. He picked up his gate phone and dialed the aircraft directly. "Sarah, it's David at the gate. We might have a situation developing between two first-class passengers. The woman who just boarded Victoria Ashford has been making complaints about the young man in 2A. You might want to keep an eye on the dynamic between them." On the aircraft lead flight attendant, Sarah Thompson, made a note on her passenger service list. She'd been flying for 12 years and had developed a sixth sense about passenger conflicts. Most issues could be resolved with careful attention and proactive service, but occasionally personality clashes or preconceived notions created situations that required more active management. Victoria reached the aircraft door and was greeted with Sarah's professional smile. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Ashford. May I show you to your seat? I'm perfectly capable of finding my own seat," Victoria replied curtly. "But I do need to speak with someone in authority about another passenger." Sarah's internal warning system activated. 2 mentions of passenger conflicts in 30 seconds was unusual. "I'd be happy to address any concerns once we're airborne, Mrs. Ashford. Right now we're focused on getting everyone settled safely." Victoria huffed and walked into the first-class cabin. The Boeing 777's premium section was a masterpiece of luxury design. 8 individual suites arranged in a 1-2-1 configuration, each with a lie-flat seat, 23-inch personal television screen, and sliding privacy door. The cabin was decorated in warm beiges and soft blues, with ambient lighting that made everything look elegant and peaceful. Devon was already in seat 2A, the window suite on the left side of the aircraft. He'd stowed his backpack in the overhead compartment and was looking out the window at the rain-soaked tarmac with wonder in his eyes. His first flight, first time in first class, first time traveling anywhere without his family. Everything was new and amazing. Victoria's seat was 2F across the aisle and 1 row back. She had a clear view of Devon's suite, which meant she could monitor his behavior throughout the flight. She settled into her seat and immediately opened the privacy door that would normally provide separation between passenger suites. "Excuse me," Victoria called loudly across the aisle. "Young man." Devon looked over, surprised to be addressed by a fellow passenger. "Yes, ma'am. I'm curious about something," Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly through the cabin. "How did you end up in first class today?" The question was innocent enough on the surface, but Devon could hear the suspicion underneath it. Other passengers were beginning to board and file past them. A few looked over curiously at the conversation happening between the teenager in the hoodie and the well-dressed woman who was questioning him like a prosecutor. "I bought a ticket," Devon answered, simply turning back toward the window. "Bought it yourself?" Victoria pressed. "Or did someone buy it for you?" Devon felt heat rising in his cheeks. The question was invasive and inappropriate. No one had questioned the businessman's ticket. No one had interrogated the German woman about how she'd paid for her seat. But somehow his presence required explanation and justification. "I don't think that's really your business," Devon said politely but firmly. Victoria smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd just proven her point. Legitimate passengers didn't evade simple questions. Important customers didn't get defensive about normal conversation. This boy's refusal to provide details confirmed everything she'd been thinking since the lounge. "You're right," she said, pulling out her phone. "It's not my business, but I think it might be someone else's business very soon." Devon turned to look at her fully for the first time, and what he saw in her eyes made his stomach drop. It wasn't curiosity or even skepticism. It was contempt. Pure undisguised contempt for his presence in this space. He'd seen that look before, but never from someone who was about to be trapped in a metal tube with him for 8 hours. Sarah Thompson watched the interaction from the galley with growing concern. The dynamic between these two passengers was already tense, and they hadn't even finished boarding yet. She made another mental note to keep close attention on row 2 throughout the flight. As more passengers filed past them, Devon tried to focus on the excitement of his journey. Google was waiting. The Tech Summit was waiting. His future was waiting. But Victoria Ashford's stare felt like a weight on his shoulders, a constant reminder that some people would never see his achievements, only his appearance. The confrontation in the lounge had been just the beginning. The real battle was about to unfold at 37,000 feet with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. The first-class cabin of Flight 447 filled slowly with passengers who carried themselves with the confidence that came from buying the most expensive tickets on the plane. Tech executives scrolled through phones, checking stock prices and email. Investment bankers reviewed presentation slides. Pharmaceutical executives like Victoria's husband Richard made final calls before takeoff. But none of them paid attention to the drama unfolding in row 2, where a 17-year-old boy was about to face the most humiliating experience of his young life. Devon had pulled out his laptop and was running final checks on the presentation he'd give at tomorrow's Google announcement. The acquisition contract was in his backpack, signed and notarized, along with a welcome packet from Google's London office. Everything was legitimate, documented, and legal. But he could feel Victoria's eyes on him like searchlights looking for any excuse to validate her suspicions. Young man Victoria called across the aisle again, her voice louder than necessary. "I couldn't help but notice your laptop. Is that government property?" The question was so absurd that Devon actually laughed. "Government property? No, ma'am, it's mine. It's just very advanced looking." Victoria continued, her voice carrying to passengers in nearby rows. "The kind of equipment that might be issued to employees or interns." Devon realized she was fishing again, trying to get him to admit he was someone's assistant or dependent rather than a legitimate passenger. The assumption was insulting on multiple levels. She couldn't imagine that he might own advanced technology. She couldn't conceive that he might have earned his seat through his own achievements. "I built it myself," Devon said, closing the laptop screen. "For my programming work." "Programming," Victoria repeated as if testing the word for authenticity. "How interesting. What kind of programming does a teenager do?" Sarah Thompson was approaching with the pre-departure beverage service, carrying a silver tray with champagne orange juice and water. She'd been listening to the conversation and didn't like the direction it was heading. Victoria's questions were becoming increasingly invasive and pointed. "Good evening, Mr. Martinez," Sarah said warmly, positioning herself between Devon and Victoria. "Would you like something to drink before we take off?" "Water would be great. Thank you," Devon replied, grateful for the interruption. "And for you, Mrs. Ashford?" Sarah asked, turning to Victoria with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Champagne," Victoria said curtly. "And I'd like to continue my conversation with the young man across the aisle." Sarah handed Devon his water and Victoria her champagne, but she didn't move away from row 2. Her presence was a subtle signal that she was monitoring the interaction between these passengers. "Actually," Victoria said, raising her voice so other passengers could hear clearly, "I think everyone on this flight deserves to know who they're flying with. Young man, what exactly do you do for a living?" Devon felt every eye in first class turn toward him. The businessman in 1A looked up from his Financial Times. The couple in row 3 paused their conversation. The pharmaceutical executive in 1F glanced over with mild interest. Suddenly, Devon was the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. "I'm a software developer," Devon answered honestly, though he knew the truth was more complicated than that simple description. Software developer Victoria repeated her tone, suggesting she'd caught him in a lie. At 17, what company employs 17-year-old software developers? Devon hesitated. He couldn't reveal the Google acquisition publicly. The announcement was scheduled for tomorrow's conference. He'd signed confidentiality agreements. But his silence looked like evasiveness to Victoria and to the other passengers who were now listening intently to their conversation. "I'm not sure I need to discuss my employment details with other passengers," Devon said diplomatically. Victoria's face lit up with triumph. There it is." There it. He won't say because he can't say, because there's nothing to say." She turned to address the other first-class passengers directly. "This boy has been lying since the airport lounge. He claims to be a software developer, but he won't name a company. He has expensive equipment, but he won't explain how he afforded it. He's traveling first class, but he acts like he's never been on a plane before." Devon's face burned with embarrassment and anger. Everything Victoria had said was factually true, but deliberately misleading. He was a software developer, but not in the traditional sense. He did have expensive equipment, but he'd built it himself with parts he'd saved money to buy. He was traveling first class for the first time because this was the first time anyone had ever paid for him to do so. Ma'am Devon said, his voice steady, despite his racing heart. "I don't know why you're so interested in my personal business, but I have every right to be on this flight in this seat same as you." "Do you?" Victoria challenged. "Because I think if we looked closely at your ticket, we might find some interesting details about how it was purchased." Sarah Thompson had heard enough. She stepped forward with her authority as lead flight attendant clearly established. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm going to need you to keep your voice down and respect other passengers' privacy. Personal interrogations are not appropriate cabin behavior." Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. "Personal interrogations? I'm trying to protect the safety and security of this flight. This boy is clearly not who he claims to be." "Based on what evidence?" Sarah asked firmly. Victoria gestured toward Devon as if his appearance was evidence enough. "Look at him. Look at how he's dressed. Look at his age. Does he look like someone who belongs in first class?" The words hung in the cabin air like toxic gas. Every passenger in first class heard them clearly. The businessman in 1A shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The couple in row 3 exchanged meaningful glances. The pharmaceutical executive in 1F pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. Devon felt something inside his chest crack open. All his life he'd been judged by his appearance rather than his abilities. He'd been followed in stores, questioned by teachers, stopped by security guards who assumed he didn't belong wherever they found him. But this was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be his moment of validation, his proof that merit mattered more than assumptions. "Mrs. Ashford Sarah," said her voice carrying the weight of 12 years of airline authority, "you are out of line. Mr. Martinez is a valued passenger with a legitimate ticket, and I will not tolerate harassment of any passenger on this aircraft." "Harassment?" Victoria laughed sharply. "I'm asking reasonable questions about suspicious behavior. If this boy has nothing to hide, he should have no problem answering them." Devon stood up slowly, his hands trembling slightly with controlled rage. He was taller than Victoria had expected, and when he spoke his voice carried a dignity that surprised everyone in the cabin. "Ma'am, I don't have to prove anything to you. I don't have to justify my presence here or explain how I paid for my ticket or defend my right to exist in the same space as you. The only thing suspicious about this situation is your behavior." Victoria's face turned red. "How dare you speak to me that way? I'm trying to protect everyone on this flight from whatever scam you're running." "What scam?" Devon asked, his voice rising for the first time. "What exactly do you think I'm doing? What crime do you think I'm committing by sitting in a seat I paid for?" "You didn't pay for it," Victoria snapped. "Someone paid for it. Someone you're probably planning to rob or defraud or worse." The cabin fell silent. Victoria had crossed a line from suspicion into outright accusation. She was now suggesting that Devon was planning to commit serious crimes against other passengers. The pharmaceutical executive in 1F was recording the entire conversation on his phone. The businessman in 1A had called for a flight attendant. The couple in row 3 was whispering urgently about whether they should request different seats. Devon felt tears of frustration and anger building behind his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He would not give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing him break down. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder containing his boarding pass identification and the Google welcome packet. "Here," he said, handing the documents to Sarah. "Check everything. Verify everything. I have nothing to hide." Sarah accepted the documents and reviewed them quickly. Devon's boarding pass showed a legitimate first-class reservation purchased by Google Corporate Travel. His identification confirmed his age and name. The welcome packet contained official Google letterhead welcoming him to London for a confidential business announcement at the Tech Summit. Mrs. Ashford Sarah said firmly, "Mr. Martinez's travel documents are completely legitimate. He is exactly who he says he is, and he has every right to be in first class. I need you to return to your seat and discontinue this harassment immediately." Victoria stared at the documents in Sarah's hands as if they were forgeries. She couldn't reconcile what she was seeing with what she believed about who belonged in first class and who didn't. Rather than accepting that her assumptions had been wrong, she doubled down on her suspicions. "Anyone can fake documents," she said desperately. "Anyone can print fake boarding passes. This proves nothing." The businessman in 1A had had enough. "Lady, what is wrong with you?" "The kid showed you his papers. The flight attendant verified everything. What more do you want?" "I want the truth," Victoria replied sharply. "I want to know why a teenager in a hoodie is flying first class to London and why everyone is just accepting his story without question." Devon looked around the cabin at the faces of the other passengers. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed uncomfortable with the confrontation. A few appeared genuinely concerned about Victoria's accusations. But all of them were now part of an incident that was spiraling beyond anyone's control. "You know what Devon said?" His voice cracking slightly. "I'm going to call my mom. Maybe if she explains who I am and where I come from and how hard we've worked for this moment, maybe then you'll believe I deserve to be here." He pulled out his phone and dialed his mother's number. Maria Martinez answered on the first ring. "Baby, are you okay? I saw on the news that flights are delayed," Mom Devon said, putting the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. "Can you please tell the people on my flight who I am? Someone here thinks I'm lying about everything." Maria's voice filled the cabin, warm and proud and unmistakably maternal. "My son is Devon Martinez. He's 17 years old. He's flying to London because Google is buying his app for over $2 million. He's the smartest, kindest, hardest working person I know, and anyone who has a problem with him can go straight to hell. The cabin erupted. The businessman in 1A started applauding. The couple in row 3 cheered. The pharmaceutical executive in 1F shouted, "You tell them, Mama?" Even Sarah Thompson was smiling with genuine emotion. But Victoria Ashford stared at the phone in Devon's hand with pure hatred in her eyes. She had been proven wrong in the most public, humiliating way possible, and rather than accepting her mistake, she decided to make one final desperate play. "Anyone can have someone lie for them on the phone," she said viciously. "This whole thing is an elaborate setup. That woman probably isn't even his mother." The cabin fell silent again. Victoria had just suggested that Devon had orchestrated an elaborate fraud involving fake documents, fake relatives, and fake corporate communications, all to steal a first-class seat on a transatlantic flight. Devon hung up the phone and looked at Victoria with something approaching pity in his eyes. "Ma'am, I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because you're so convinced that people like me don't deserve good things that you'd rather believe in an impossible conspiracy than accept that a black teenager might have earned something you think belongs only to people like you." Victoria stood up abruptly, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. "I want this boy removed from this flight immediately. I want him arrested for fraud. I want him investigated by airport security." She pulled out her phone and began dialing. "I'm calling the police. Let's see how your story holds up when real authorities get involved." Devon sank back into his seat, exhausted and heartbroken. This was supposed to be the best day of his life. Instead, it was becoming one of the worst. But he had no idea that help was already on the way. In the cockpit, Captain Miguel Rodriguez had been monitoring the situation through the aircraft's internal communication system. He'd heard enough of the confrontation to understand exactly what was happening in his first-class cabin. And as a man who had lost his own brother to racial profiling, he was about to take action that would change everything. While Victoria Ashford was dialing 911 to report what she believed was an elaborate fraud, she had no idea that her confrontation with Devon Martinez was already being broadcast live to thousands of viewers across multiple social media platforms. Carlos Rivera, a marketing executive seated in business class, had opened TikTok 30 minutes earlier to document his journey to the London Tech Summit. He was known among his followers for posting behind-the-scenes content from industry conferences, and he'd planned to film some casual travel content during the flight. Instead, he found himself capturing what would become the most viral airline incident in internet history. Carlos had heard the raised voices from first class and quietly moved closer to get a better view. When Victoria began her public interrogation of Devon, Carlos started recording. His TikTok account had 47,000 followers, mostly tech industry professionals and entrepreneurs. Within minutes of posting the first clip, his phone was exploding with notifications. "Y'all, I'm witnessing something incredible on my flight to London right now," Carlos whispered into his phone camera. "This woman in first class is basically harassing this young black kid because she doesn't think he belongs there. This is happening in real time." The first video had been viewed 12,000 times before Victoria even finished calling the police. Comments poured in faster than Carlos could read them. "This is exactly what happened to my nephew at the Marriott. Classic Karen behavior. Post more videos. Someone needs to identify this woman. This is unacceptable. That kid is handling this with more grace than I ever could." Maria Santos, the tech journalist from the airport lounge, had boarded the flight and was seated in business class as well. She'd been following Carlos's TikTok live stream while simultaneously posting her own Twitter thread about the incident. Maria had covered discrimination in Silicon Valley for 5 years, and she recognized the broader significance of what was happening. Thread: currently witnessing racial profiling on Flight 447 to London. Young black teenager being questioned about his right to sit in first class by white woman who demands proof of his legitimacy. This is 2024. This is still happening. Maria's first tweet was retweeted 400 times in 10 minutes. Her followers included tech executives, venture capitalists, and social justice activists who immediately began amplifying the story across their own networks. The pharmaceutical executive in Seat 1F, Dr. James Mitchell, had been recording the confrontation on his phone as well. Unlike Carlos and Maria, who were sharing content in real time, James was documenting everything as potential legal evidence. He'd witnessed clear harassment and discrimination, and he wanted to ensure there was a complete record of Victoria's behavior. When Devon's mother spoke to the cabin over speakerphone, James captured every word. When Victoria accused Maria Martinez of lying about being Devon's mother, James zoomed in on Victoria's face to document her expression. He wasn't planning to post anything publicly, but he was creating a comprehensive video record that would soon become crucial evidence. In Seat 3C Technology, investor Rebecca Kim was live tweeting the incident to her 32,000 followers. Rebecca had made her fortune investing in AI startups, and she was flying to London to announce a major fund focused on underrepresented founders. The irony of witnessing racial discrimination while traveling to promote diversity in tech was not lost on her. Update from 35,000 feet. Watching a young black entrepreneur get interrogated by racist passenger who can't believe he belongs in first class. Plot twist. He's probably more successful than anyone else on this plane. When will this end? Rebecca's tweets were being screenshot and shared to Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Tech industry group chats were buzzing with outrage. The story was spreading beyond social media into private professional networks, where people knew exactly who was flying to London for the summit. The viral explosion reached critical mass when Marcus Thompson Devon's best friend from Queens saw Carlos's TikTok video. Marcus immediately recognized Devon and began sharing the clips to every platform he could access. "Yo, everybody share this. That's my boy Devon getting harassed on that plane. He's flying to London because Google bought his app. This woman is trying to destroy him because she's racist trash. Make this go viral now." Marcus had only 3,000 followers on Instagram, but his post was shared by Devon's other friends, family members, teachers, and community members. The story spread from elite tech circles to working-class neighborhoods in Queens. Devon's high school coding club created a hashtag, Justice for Devon. His church started a prayer chain. His mother's co-workers at the hospital began sharing the videos with their own networks. The convergence of elite tech Twitter and grassroots community organizing created a perfect viral storm. Within 45 minutes of the first TikTok post, Flight 447 was trending in 3 countries. The story had spread across demographic, geographic, and professional boundaries to become a shared moment of collective outrage. But the social media explosion was having real-world consequences aboard the aircraft itself. Victoria Ashford had no idea that her phone call to 911 was being broadcast live to thousands of viewers. She had no idea that her face was being screenshot and shared across every major social media platform. She had no idea that her name was already being researched by internet detectives who were identifying her husband's company and their home address. "I need to report a fraud in progress," Victoria said loudly into her phone. "I'm on Flight 447 at JFK Airport, and there's a teenage boy in first class who is obviously lying about his identity and using stolen documents." Carlos Rivera was recording every word while providing live commentary to his TikTok audience. "Y'all, she's literally calling the police on this kid for existing while black in first class. This is insane." The 911 dispatcher asked Victoria for specific evidence of fraudulent behavior. Victoria struggled to articulate concrete facts, instead repeating her assumptions about Devon's appearance, age, and behavior. "He doesn't look like he belongs in first class," Victoria explained to the dispatcher. "He's dressed inappropriately. He was nervous about a business meeting. He won't provide details about his employer." The dispatcher asked if Victoria had witnessed any actual illegal activity. Victoria hesitated, realizing that she had no evidence of wrongdoing beyond her own suspicions. Well, no, but it's obvious something isn't right. Young people like him don't fly first class unless they're stealing or lying. Carlos's TikTok audience exploded with comments. The viewer count had reached 67,000 and was climbing rapidly. Comments poured in from around the world. Did she just say young people like him? The racism is right there. Someone please tell me the police aren't actually coming. This woman needs to be on every do not fly list in America. That kid is going to sue the airline for allowing this harassment. Meanwhile, Maria Santos had shifted from documenting the incident to actively investigating Victoria's background. Using publicly available information, Maria had identified Victoria as the wife of pharmaceutical executive Richard Ashford. She'd found photos from charity galas and social events showing Victoria at upscale Manhattan gatherings. Update racist passenger has been identified as Victoria Ashford, wife of pharmaceutical executive. This woman lives in a world of extreme privilege and is using it to terrorize a teenager whose only crime is being successful while black. The identification of Victoria Ashford triggered a new wave of viral activity. People began researching her husband's company, Ashford Pharmaceuticals. They found records of the company's legal settlements, regulatory violations, and executive compensation packages. They discovered that Richard Ashford had made controversial statements about healthcare access and pricing. Within an hour, Ashford Pharmaceuticals was receiving hundreds of angry emails and phone calls from people demanding that they address Victoria's behavior. The company's stock price began to decline as news of the incident spread through financial networks. Board members who were traveling to London for unrelated business began receiving urgent messages from their communications teams. But the most significant development was happening in the cockpit of Flight 447, where Captain Miguel Rodriguez was monitoring both the passenger situation and the social media explosion through the aircraft's Wi-Fi network. Rodriguez had access to real-time passenger communications and could see the viral growth of hashtags related to his flight. He could see the TikTok videos, the Twitter threads, and the Instagram posts. He could see that a private passenger dispute had become a global news story, while his aircraft was still sitting on the tarmac. More importantly, Rodriguez could see that Devin Martinez was telling the truth about everything. Social media sleuths had verified his identity, confirmed his Google acquisition deal, and documented his academic achievements. There was no fraud. There was no deception. There was only a 17-year-old boy being terrorized by an adult who couldn't accept his right to succeed. Rodriguez made a decision that would define the rest of his career. He was going to take personal control of this situation, not just as a captain responsible for aircraft safety, but as a man who had watched racial profiling destroy his own family. He picked up the cabin intercom and made an announcement that would soon be heard around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently experiencing a passenger disturbance that requires my immediate attention. I will be leaving the cockpit to address this situation personally. We will not be departing until this matter is resolved to my satisfaction. In the first-class cabin, Devin looked up with surprise. He'd never heard of a captain leaving the cockpit to handle passenger disputes. But Victoria Ashford smiled with satisfaction. Finally, someone in authority was taking her concerns seriously. She had no idea that Captain Rodriguez was about to become her worst nightmare. The social media explosion continued to accelerate. The hashtag Flight 447 was now trending globally. News outlets were beginning to pick up the story. Television producers were dispatching crews to JFK Airport. And in the first-class cabin of a Boeing 777 that was still sitting on the ground, a confrontation between two passengers was about to become a defining moment in the fight for dignity and equality in air travel. Carlos Rivera continued his live stream, now addressing nearly 100,000 viewers. Y'all, the captain just announced he's coming back here personally. This is about to get real. This woman has no idea what's coming for her. But neither Carlos nor any of his viewers could have predicted what would happen next. Captain Miguel Rodriguez was about to deliver a lesson in justice that would be remembered long after Flight 447 finally reached its destination. Captain Miguel Rodriguez unbuckled his harness and stood up from the left seat of the Boeing 747's cockpit. In 20 years of commercial aviation, he had left the flight deck during ground operations exactly 7 times, twice for medical emergencies involving passengers, 3 times for mechanical issues requiring his personal inspection, once for a security threat that turned out to be a false alarm, and once for a passenger dispute that reminded him too much of the day his brother Carlos died. Today would be number 8. "Dave, you have the aircraft," Rodriguez told his co-pilot, First Officer David Park. "Monitor ground control and passenger communications. If this situation escalates, be ready to call airport security immediately." "What's the plan?" Cap Park asked, concern evident in his voice. Rodriguez paused at the cockpit door. "Justice," he said simply. "The plan is justice." Rodriguez had been following the passenger disturbance through the aircraft's internal communication system and the social media explosion visible through his cockpit Wi-Fi access. He'd heard Victoria Ashford's accusations. He'd witnessed Devin Martinez's calm responses. He'd watched the viral videos spreading across TikTok and Twitter. Most importantly, he'd verified Devin's identity and Google acquisition story through official airline communications. But Captain Rodriguez's decision to intervene personally wasn't just about passenger safety or airline policies. It was about 12 years of grief, anger, and determination to ensure that what happened to his brother Carlos would never happen to another young man on his watch. Carlos Rodriguez had been 23 when he died, a community college graduate working at an electronics store in Phoenix while saving money to become an electrician. He'd been walking home from work on a Tuesday evening when someone called 911 to report a suspicious Hispanic male in the neighborhood. The responding officers had approached with weapons drawn and assumptions already made. Carlos had died on the sidewalk 3 blocks from his apartment, his work uniform still bearing his name tag, his hand still carrying the electronics textbooks he'd been studying during his lunch break.